You're listening to the Transform Your Life from the Inside Out podcast. This episode is titled, Do You Need to Trust Yourself More? Now, on introspection and listening to that question, many of you probably think, yes, I don't trust myself in a lot of areas. Well, I have a new way, a different way, and a new perspective for you to see this from, and a new way to start thinking about trusting yourself. Keep listening.
Hi, I'm Jim Fortin, and you're about to start transforming your life from the inside out with this podcast. I'm widely considered the leader in subconscious transformation, and I've coached super achievers all around the world for over 25 years. Here, you're going to find no rah-rah motivation and no hype, because this podcast is a combination of brain science, transformational psychology, and ancient wisdom all rolled into one to take your life to levels you've never thought possible. If you're wanting a lot more in life, to feel better, to heal, to have peace of mind, to feel powerful and alive, and to bring more abundance and prosperity into your life, then this podcast is for you, because you're going to start learning how to master your mind and evolve your consciousness. And when you do that, anything you want then becomes possible for you. I'm glad you're here.
Trusting yourself. That's a big one. And I came about this episode because we're launching this week our transformational coaching program. We do it twice a year. And I'm watching people, and I see this all the time. We've done this program for a few years now. And I see people wanting to register, and we do have quite a few register. And some people saying, I want to, but you know what? The investment, I don't know, etc. And what I recognized is that there and all the pre-training and the initial training we have, because they trust me, they find huge value. And it's basically the same thing as you listening to the podcast. You find value here. But yet, it's not that they don't trust me, because I have a full guarantee as well. I mean, 100% money back. It's not that they don't trust me. It's that they don't trust themselves to, take the content, the transformational content, and help, me shifting their context, which is the place they're thinking from, their belief structure. And, I've been watching this for years, and I'm like, it's not me. It's not me that they don't trust, because if they didn't trust me, they wouldn't be here. They wouldn't stay through the entire No Charge series. And the kudos and the comments and all these kind of things. And it dawned on me, no, it's not me. It's that people don't trust themselves. And I started thinking about that, looking at my own life. And I want to share a couple of stories with you. And by the way, like I say on every episode, I don't know how long this episode's going to be. I mean, it can be 12 minutes. It can be 30. I don't know. I never know until I get started talking. And I've got a really busy week, so I had to get this episode out. So again, I'm going to try to cut it a little shorter. But for me also, it's not about how long or how short an episode is. The most important thing to me is that you get a major aha, a morsel of something, food for thought in every episode, whether it's 1 minute or 30 minutes. So anyway, that being said, I have no idea how long this episode will go. It could go 12 minutes, but I promise you, it can go 30, I don't know. But I promise you, I'm going to start shifting the way you think about trusting yourself in this episode. I don't do it anymore, but for about a decade, I taught subconscious persuasion and influence. And basically, I would teach selling professionals how to get into the mind and the brain of their prospect. And of course, ethically, that's a big deal to me to ethically influence. But I would teach people how to literally, influence people subconsciously. And I did that for a lot of years. And I've learned over the years that I'm no different than anyone else. We're all the same. Even though we might have, different circumstances, we're human beings and we're all the same. And I started thinking about this crazy, example that I'm giving you. I started thinking about, because it takes me back to some stories about myself I want to share, is how much do I trust myself now, which is something I don't even think about, and I'll tell you why in a minute. How much did I trust myself in the past? And I remember about, 10 years ago going to a transformational weekend with a woman who became my coach for a couple of years. And in that weekend, she said something, and I trusted her, and meaning she was a really good coach, a really insightful coach. And speaking of trust, during that weekend, she said, Jim, you need to learn to trust yourself more. And then I explored, and this is how I come up with my episodes, is I watch my own life. So I started exploring my own behavior. And I recognize that now, absolutely, I do trust myself. But for a large part of my life, I didn't trust myself. And in particular, I didn't trust myself in the area of money. And what I mean by that is how do I say this? I didn't trust that if I invested a lot of money in something, that I'd make the money back. Even if I believed in the person, and even if I analytically knew that, yes, I need to do this. People rave about this vendor or that vendor or this person who runs Facebook ads or this program or that program. Boy, Heidi, I sure need that program. But a lot of times I wouldn't take action. And then I asked myself, was it the person that was offering the service that I didn't trust? And I'm like, no, it wasn't the person offering the service that I didn't trust. It was me. And my not trusting was thinking that if I invest the money in this, then will I or will I not get the results that I'm desperate for to grow my business, to change my life, whatever it might be. And I had an epiphany as I'm leading to, and as I've kind of alluded to. It wasn't the offering or the person or whatever that I was looking at. It always came back to me, is that I didn't trust myself. And as ridiculous as that is, I know a lot of us think that way, is that we think for some reason, oh, that program worked for other people, but you know what? For some reason, the universe has singled me out. I'm the only one in this universe, in the midst of multiverses, and I'm the only one in this galaxy and the only one on this planet this ain't going to work for. Works for everybody else, but it's not going to work for me. And I thought about that, and I'm like, Jim, that's ridiculous. What do you, if it's going to work for someone else, if you model their behavior, it's going to work for you. Now, all this being said, and hopefully this is making sense, is when you look at trusting yourself, because I know you're already thinking through trusting yourself, and what I'm saying I know can relate to a lot of you guys. There's a phrase that I live from, and I found that to be true, and I learned it, ironically didn't pop into my mind till now, was a man that is one of my friends. We've been friends for 20-something years, personal friends, and for the better part of a decade, he was literally perhaps the most recognized internet guru in the world. And his name is Rich Schefren. And he said to me many years ago, he said, Jim, what's most personal is most general. So as I'm, thinking about sharing personal things with you, I know that you can generalize it to yourself. And I know you're thinking about levels of trust. And then what you go into and what you're thinking about are things like, what, should I change schools? Should I get married? Should I get a new job? Should I move across the country? Should I do whatever it is, X, Y, Z, or the other? And I want you to notice that many times when we're talking about levels of trust, and we're talking about trust, without even recognizing it, we're also talking about external things, like jobs and all these kind of things. And here's something which I'm going to go much deeper than this in this episode for your transformational takeaway. But we never recognize that many times what we don't need is trust. we need more resources. And it's not that we need to be developing more trust in something or even trust in ourselves. It's that many times when we don't trust something and we don't trust ourselves, it's because we haven't developed the resources to be able to trust ourselves. So many times we're just, generically saying, well, nope, I don't trust that I'll get the results. Well, if other people get the results with whatever they do, then it works. They must be using different internal resources. So trusting ourselves, partly what I want to share in this episode, is not about trusting yourself. It's about developing more internal resources so that you can trust yourself. So hopefully that makes sense to you. Because many times, we could say, for example, I want to get a new job and I want to go to XYZ company so I can make more money. And then we start talking to ourselves, telling ourselves why we can't do it. Well, if other people are doing it, why can't we do it? And it's because we haven't developed the resources. It just popped in my mind. I remember many years ago, an influential friend of mine who was the one who got me into the personal development industry. I wouldn't be here today without my friend Doug. He took a job for a company and I talked him into it. And we were waiting tables at that time. And I remember he came into work. He was still waiting tables and taking the job. And he came in and like 2 or 3 days into the job, and he's like, and it was for a payroll services company and a lot of technology. And he goes, I don't know if I can do this. I'm like, Dougie, you can do this. You can do this. And I remember a year later, we were having a beer out somewhere, and he's like, God, my job's easy. And I'm like, do you remember when you said your job was hard a year ago? And he's like, yep. And we started laughing at that. It's that Doug developed more resources. So when he was saying things like, I don't think I can do this, it wasn't that he was not trusting himself. It was that he was not trusting what he believed was his lack of ability. And when he developed more ability, the trust came automatically. And that's what I want to do in this short episode is, and I say short because I am going to wrap this up soon. I know where I want to go and how I want to finish this, is I don't even think about trusting myself anymore. That when I was, thinking of this episode, which popped in my head about an hour ago, and I'm like, woo, okay, thank God I've got an episode. I've got to give this to my team today. And what am I going to talk about? And I got a bunch of notes and I was thumbing through them. And I recognized that I no longer, it doesn't even cross my mind about trusting myself. And I'm like, Jim, and I sat here for about an hour tonight, and I was like, Jim, what changed? What changed in you that you went from a person that would constantly doubt yourself to trusting yourself? And as you know, you probably listened to the podcast for a while, and I'm still learning my lessons. We're human, we're learning. I've worked with a shaman for 25 years, and I've had the opportunity to learn a lot of things. And just because I've had the opportunity doesn't mean that I've integrated them or I've actually learned them or really come to know them. Some I have, some I haven't. Some I learned quicker. Some are like, Jim, what is your problem? Why are you dragging your heels? I mean, it's taking you longer to master this. And I've been at some very intense with this shaman. I mean, things that you would consider to be paranormal and multi-dimensional for real, and things that would literally time warp your mind and warp your mind, period. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm still learning things in this lifetime. And I'm tying all this together. It might be kind of mishmash, but I promise you're going to get the end result when I tell you what it is, what I came to. And I recognize that at some point along the way, and I talk about this a lot on the podcast, is I talk about non-attachment, meaning do not attach to outcomes. Many years ago, my brother-in-law said to me, Don Javier, the shaman, he said, Jimmy, he goes, one of your biggest limitations is your expectations. You have expectations of things. And when the world doesn't work like your expectation, you're angry and frustrated and all these kind of things. And you're all these ways, these negative ways, because the world doesn't match your expectations. And I recognized that attachment is along the same lines, at least how I'm talking about it now, and it's easy to trust yourself when you don't have expectations of the outcome of a behavior. My friend Doug, that I'd mentioned earlier, when he was, the first couple of days at this job, he had very strong expectations by watching the environment around him, saying, I don't think I can do this. And he wasn't trusting himself. So instead of, just trusting and developing the abilities, he wasn't trusting himself because of the expectations he has. And that caused the doubt. And the doubt is what causes us to say, no, I'm not going to move to that new job. I'm not going to ask for a raise. I'm not going to move across the country. I'm not going to do these things that I want to do. And it's because we're not trusting ourselves. It's because we don't move across country because we don't know what's going to happen, because we have expectations about what is supposed to start happening. And notice, when you do things anyway, and you drop the expectation, which is what you're vicariously doing when you're doing it and you're in the process of doing it, what happens is, because we're very adaptable creatures, you start adapting, like my friend Doug did. You start adapting and you start acquiring new abilities, new skills, and not even recognizing it, but you are teaching yourself and training yourself to trust yourself without even recognizing it's because you're not having the same expectations that you had prior to the beginning of the whole thing. Couple of things here. Some transformational takeaways is, you've heard me say in various forms before, is that until you leave your comfort zone, you're never going to leave your comfort zone. And the same thing about trusting yourself. If you don't start trusting yourself, at least in the context we're talking about, at least trusting yourself, if you don't at least start doing that, then you will never do it. Why? The conundrum is, the catch-22 is that if you don't do it, you don't learn. If you don't learn, you don't do it. And it becomes that vicious cycle. So if you're going to be stuck on trust, then start trusting yourself. And the way to do that is to start putting yourself out there and start saying, you know what? I am going to take that extra step. I am going to do this. I'm going to do that. I'm going to put myself out there and start trusting yourself. Because until you do that, you won't start doing it. And then secondly, where I went in this podcast, is that, as I said, for most of us, trust is about attachment. And I know if you've been around for any amount of time, you've heard me talk about where the Buddha said, and this is powerful, that attachment is your greatest cause of suffering. So think about that. And think about trust. And notice where you're not trusting something, it's because, plain and simple, you're attached to an outcome. I don't want to go too much further here, but I've learned over the years with a shaman and through events in my life, I've had a very fortunate life. Even the things that have happened to me this past year with heart failure and a hemorrhagic stroke. You ain't going to leave this life alive. And it's finite. And you've heard me talk about death. Today's a great day to die. You've heard me say before, maybe, if you've listened for any amount of time. You know, what makes one day over another day a better day to die? You're going to die at some point, and it doesn't matter because you never die, which I had in the recent episode. That's just a social word, a collective word, a mass word. You're never going to die. You just transition. You transform. You change form. So that being said, looping back around to the content this week, what is there to be attached to? I mean, where I work from is I do what I do, and whatever the outcomes are what the outcomes are. And I learn from the outcomes. But you know what? I'm never even going to get the outcomes to learn from or to adjust or tweak if I don't at least first do something. So your transformational takeaway this week, if you must hang on to trust, and I got to trust myself, then guess what? As I said, you're never going to trust yourself until you actually step out that puts you in a situation where you have to trust yourself to learn to trust yourself. So to recap that, you don't start trusting yourself until you start trusting yourself. And then finally, trust is about attachment. And we have to let go of the outcome and the qualifications that we have on an outcome and just do what we do. Let life take care of itself. Let the universe take care of us as we're in the universe. And surrender, do not doubt, and trust. And as I say all the time, everything always has been, is now, and it's going to be fine. Okay, now, I probably butchered this episode. You're like, dude, this guy's all over the place in this episode. I don't know if I did or I didn't. I probably butchered it. If I did, oh well. And if I didn't, and you got the points that I'm sharing with you, then ponder those. It's so easy this day and age, and people do it. I know. I watch. It's so easy to listen to something, and people will say, like, my students will say, oh, I forgot that. Well, forgetting's a choice. So it's so easy to listen to this episode and say, you know what? That is a great new way for me to start processing and for me to start thinking. Oops, squirrel. And you get distracted and you forget it all. So take the rest of the day and ponder how much attachment you have to all the expectations you have in the world that hinder your level and your ability to openly trust. Final comment is we do want to trust reasonably and rationally in the world. I mean, you don't want to walk up to a stranger and give them a blank check that's signed and, here, fill it out. You know what I mean? And use your common sense. But in trusting ourselves, let go of expectation. Okay, hopefully you enjoyed this episode, and I will catch you on the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to this entire podcast. If you're the kind of person who likes to help others, then share this with your friends and family. If you found value, they will too. So please share via your social media channels. Also, if you have questions, I'm here to assist. You can email me questions to support@jimfortin.com, and I may even use your question for a future podcast episode. Also, if you want transformational content like this daily, connect with me on Instagram. My Instagram name is I am Jim Fortin. Finally, I do have a personal request. I believe that we're all here to help others and to grow and evolve ourselves. Together, you and I, let's help more people. If you would please leave a review on iTunes, and a good one, by the way. I'd be grateful, and through your assistance together, we can transform more lives. Thanks for listening.